Holy Father, we are grateful. We thank you for your passionate voice against the deadly conflicts that ravage the lives of so many men, women, and children, and your call for nations to resist the sirens of war and resolve disputes through diplomacy.
We're here on a series called Pictures at 13. The two globalist powers that we're speaking of is not more than just about technology, is America and the Vatican, as you can see in the picture behind. What is the source of reference? Since, let's say, 1880s, there's been clear revelation concerning prophecies, and that is from the book of Revelation, chapter 13, pictures of the times in which we live, those things which are coming to fulfillment. Our source is the Bible, but there's many interpretations. But this one has been a consistent one, as I said, given to a commandment-keeping people. The prophecies surround the law of God, and Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments, and I will love you, and my Father will love you, and we shall manifest ourselves to you. And he speaks of giving to those who love him and keep his commandments. This is in John chapter 14, giving them the Spirit of truth. But we also had, in recent times, I think this book was published in 1990, we have Malachi Martin, Keys of This Blood. And so it told us those things which were prophesied were about to come to fulfillment in the very near future. It was a three-way competition, says Malachi Martin, in which we were the victory, if you want to put it that way. We were the pawns in the game, and it was the inference was between America, Russia, and of course the Vatican would be part of the dual hegemony, and that's where we've landed today. We see those things taking shape, which was spoken of in Keys of This Blood, but a greater authority, accurate, is the prophecies given in Revelation 13, which was given an interpretation, as I said, in the 1880s, and it was given to a commandment-keeping people because Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments, I will love you, and I'll manifest myself to you, as I just said, and the Spirit of truth will be given to you. So just re-emphasizing those points. And so it's a scary world. Domination in space. We've been looking at changes that have occurred after 9/11. It was a pinnacle point. The Iraq War, that was a picture thereof. Ignatius Loyola, the head of the Jesuits, had this to say. Remember, we have the first Jesuit Pope, a man of humility, a man speaking out against war. Nor will it contribute a little to our advantage if, with caution and secrecy, they work with secrecy, we foment and heighten the animosities that arise amongst princes and great men, even to such a degree that they may weaken each other. See what it's saying? We will allow war between two people, two nations, those whom we have an interest in overcoming. But if there appear any likelihood of reconciliation, then as soon as possible let us endeavour to be the mediators, lest others prevent us. JFK says the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, for we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret proceedings and to secret oaths. For we are opposed around the world by monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. Speaking of the CIA, the Pentagon, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. The Jesuits we were just speaking about. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations that perfectly describes the work of the Vatican. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its descendants are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumour is printed. No secret is revealed. And the military-industrial complex of the USA, no expenditure is questioned. Millions of dollars are lost, and they don't know where it actually goes to. God is permitting the elements of confusion and disorder to bear sway for a season. A power from beneath is working with all deceivableness of unrighteousness, as the Bible puts it, in those who are binding themselves together in secret societies. And the Revelation reveals these secrets, and he shows the contrast between the ways of God, pure truth, and the ways of men, a mixture of good and evil, of truth and that which is false. The Reagans, unfortunately, they got mixed up in astrology, and Nancy had this to say: astrology was simply one of the ways I coped with the fear I felt after my husband almost died. Ronald and Nancy lunched every Wednesday with the top Hollywood astrologer Carol Reiter, all during the late 1940s and 1950s. Emerging from a particularly credulous Southern California culture, Nancy and Ronald Reagan relied on an astrologer in private and public matters unknown to the voting public. Some portion of the decision-making that influences the future of our civilization is plainly in the hands of charlatans. President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan regularly attended the church after office, and Mrs. Reagan still occasionally attends. Famous celebrities go to this church, and so it says about the pop stars. And it's the LA's celebrity church. On December 4, 1981, President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12333, an executive order intended to extend the powers and responsibilities of the US intelligence agency and direct the leaders of the US federal agencies to cooperate fully with CIA requests for information. See, we speak mainly about what George Bush did, but here we have it going back further. This order, of which little was known, would see the ramifications of passing such a bill in the Snowden revelations during 2013. No wonder they wanted to get hold of him. Executive Order 12333. Ability to function outside the confines of a warrant or court order if approved by the Attorney General. Ability to operate outside the confines of judicial or congressional oversight as long as it's in the pursuit of foreign intelligence. You can see that order was how it would in the future impact on things. And so with this they're allowed to hush up things. They don't have to expose what they're doing because it's of a national interest. The Reagan legacy. Some would not be aware because we see the persona of this man, but American ideology after a failed presidency, and why had it failed? Extended finance on military programs. This is a problem extending into right now. From creditor to biggest debtor nation. Deregulation and privatization. Big mistake. Repealed the fairness doctrine, fair coverage of opposing views to national coverage. The Third World War, the third bloodiest war in all of history. And where did it go down? South America. The Church Committee investigated in 1975 uncovered what is now estimated to be over 3,000 major operations and 10,000 minor operations above constitutional law. Overthrow of functioning constitutions of the Third World, secret armies in all the continents of the world, ethnic uprising, death squads, drug trafficking, over 6 million killed. We're going to look at another organisation within the Church of Rome, which is known for its work of charity, the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta head up the CIA. That's what we're about to look at. Today the military has operation through private companies, such as that which is about to be stated. The Bank of America is Jesuit owned. We were told that through Karen Hudis, who was a lawyer in the World Bank. And she said that incorporated so much more than just the Bank of America. What does that mean when there is no backing to the finance in that country? And to get into a head position in government is known that one has to go through a Jesuit university, such as Georgetown or Fordham University. Let's have a look at this clip.
Last 3 nights, we have been quoting the sworn declaration of a former executive for XE, a company formerly called Blackwater, in which that executive describes a nearly global enterprise shot through with criminality, arms dealing, fraud, tax evasion, child prostitution, murder, all of which Z denies even in cases where its employees have already pleaded guilty. One motive for all this, the 4-year executive claims, was greed. Tonight, in our third story, the other motive was God. Jeremy Scahill, who first broke this story for The Nation magazine, wrote the definitive book on Blackwater in which he details some of the theocratic connections of founder Eric Prince. Now that former Blackwater executive, known only as John Doe No. 2, claims that Prince did more than subscribe to a fundamentalist Christian ideology. He used Z to advance it. Quote, Mr. Prince is motivated to engage in misconduct by 2 factors. First, he views himself as a Christian crusader, tasked with eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe. To that end, Mr. Prince intentionally deployed to Iraq certain men who shared his vision of Christian supremacy, knowing and wanting these men to take every available opportunity to murder Iraqis. Many of these men used call signs based on the Knights of the Templar, the warriors who fought the Crusades. At Z, Prince has surrounded himself with like-minded believers like the lobbyist Paul Behrens, board member of Christian Freedom International, and General Counsel COO Joseph Schmitz. As Inspector General at the Pentagon, Mr. Schmitz incorporated the phrase "always under the protection of the Almighty" into the official seal and said, quote, "We pride ourselves on our strict adherence to the rule of law under God." He spoke to the Order of Malta, a secretive Catholic group at the Church of Paul Bremer, another conservative Catholic in the Bush administration, and Schmitz essentially exonerated U.S. General William Boykin for turning his mission missionary.
William Joseph Wild Bill Donovan was a United States soldier, lawyer, intelligence officer, and diplomat. Donovan is best remembered as the wartime head of the Office of Strategic Service, a precursor to the CIA during World War II. He is also known as the father of American intelligence and the father of Central Intelligence. Donovan graduated from Columbia in 1905 and was a member of the Knights of Malta. Donovan was a graduate of Columbia Law School and became an influential Wall Street lawyer. Donovan was named Coordinator of Information. Donovan began to lay the groundwork for the Centralized Intelligence Program. So we're going to look at some words from Donovan here.
Donovan expressed his hopes for post-war America as a world superpower. General Donovan was the prime mover in the creation of the United States' first central, full-service intelligence service. He left a legacy of strategic thinking and innovation, both in Washington and the foreign field, that was to influence the American government for decades to come. At first, OSS faced many obstacles from other parts of the government, and Donovan had to work long and hard to gain the freedom to operate successfully. Along the way, he created both analytic and operational functions. OSS enthusiastically launched espionage, paramilitary, and influence operations.
James Jesus Angleton was chief of the CIA's counterintelligence staff from 1954 to 1975, Knight of Malta. Returning to Washington, he was employed by various successor organizations to the OSS, eventually becoming one of the founder officers of the Central Intelligence Agency. You see, they're in the very ground roots of this organization. And now, of course, in considering this, the very core of the government. John A. McCone. After the disaster of the Bay of Pigs invasion, President John F. Kennedy forced the resignation of the CIA Director Alan Dulles and some of his staff. McCone replaced Dulles on November 29, 1961, and he was a Knight of Malta. Casey played a large part in the shaping of Reagan's foreign policy, trained at Fordham University. So we have here the Knights of Malta working for the Jesuit order. We have the NATO, CIA, the intelligence of the world, and they're all working. You can see how it's all fits together here. Tennant, graduate from Georgetown University, Jesuit University in 1976 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Foreign Service, and received a Master of International Affairs degree from the Columbia University in 1978. Tennant was appointed Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency in July 1995 after John Dirch's abrupt resignation in December 1996. Tennant served as acting director until he was officially appointed the position on July 1997. Okay, Tennant served through the end of the Clinton administration well into the term of George Bush. Tennant embarked on a mission to regenerate the CIA, which had fallen on hard times since the end of the Cold War. Why would it fall on hard times? Mainly because of its activities, in which it was stripped of its powers because of its blunders. Tennant testified before a public hearing of the September 11 Commission investigating 9/11 that he did not meet with Bush in August 2001, the month before September 11 attacks. The same evening after the hearings, a CIA spokesman corrected Tennant's testimony, stating that Tenet did indeed meet with Bush twice in August. Tenet, in his memoirs, writes of his memorable visit to Bush at the Bush Ranch in Crawford, Texas in August 2001. When you look up information concerning this man, he's very passionate about their side of the story and the whole thing, but all up, the truth was suppressed, and we've mentioned this clearly if we go back to those images and information on the event 9/11. So look it up, the event 9/11, in the Perfect Steps website under Pictures at 13. In August 2007, a secret report written by CIA Inspector General was made public, originally written in 2005 but kept secret. The 19-page summary states that Tenet knew the dangers of Al-Qaeda well before September 2001, but that the leadership of the CIA did not do enough to prevent any attacks. Tenet reacted to the publication of this report by calling it flat wrong, citing in particular the planning efforts of the past 2 years. And there's George Bush decorating him. There we have it, 9/11, and liberty is lost. That is such a good picture describing the whole scene. The Crusades never really ended. The Crusades of the Middle Ages of the Knights of Malta and others of the similar ilk continued as they infiltrated the mightiest military strongholds of the world, and we're speaking about the US, to carry out its missions. So the missions went on. Now here we have Obama, and in the first 100 minutes that pretty well describes the presidency, and his ideas before and after the presidency radically change. Remember his words. He said, "The ordinary man and woman is too small-minded to look after their own affairs." And then he speaks of the New World Order. Here we have Brennan. Now this is in the times of Obama. The son of an Irish immigrant from Roscommon, was raised in North Bergen, New Jersey. He attended the Immaculate Heart of Mary Elementary School and graduated from the St. Joseph of Palisades High School in West New York, New Jersey, before enrolling at Fordham University in New York City. In April 2012, Brennan was the first Obama administration official to publicly acknowledge CIA drone attacks in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. In his speech, he argued for the legality, morality, and effectiveness of the program. It's amazing how you can argue the morality of war, and this is what the Church of Rome does. It argues the legality, the right to persecute heretics, for this has been its way all through time. Under the go down further. Morris Davis, a former chief prosecutor for Guantanamo military commissions, compared Brennan to the Canadian Omar Khadr, who was convicted of committing murders in violation of the law of war. So everything that Bush put in place, Obama was going to extend, and it's about the New World Order. He stated in one of his speeches, "In this operation, the Americans get hold of the leader of Al-Qaeda, bin Laden, and assassinate him, and they're watching this in real time." But wasn't it so much more than this that was at stake? Was this created to have this global domination ultimately? And here we have Hillary Clinton waiting in the wings hoping that she, her family, can run the industrial military complex once more. Now, Obama had continue on with that which Bush had started. No surrender with the drone program, unforgiving, sends the recipients into eternity and kills the innocent as well as the guilty. No trial or evidence required. Operations in countries in which war has not been declared. The US has never swerved from their intended purpose, though it may have been generally assumed to be abandoned. That is the Star Wars program, which was spoken about under Ronald Reagan, and disinformation was used to bring down the USSR. In 1952, von Braun first published his concept of a manned space station in Collier's weekly magazine series of articles entitled "Man Will Conquer Space Soon." About 400,000 Nazis found refugee status in the United States. Can you tell us a little more on the scientists that were developing these programs and working with the US government? Can you expand on this a little bit? Under Operation Paperclip, 1,200 Nazis were brought into the United States, former Nazi intelligence. They were brought in to help create the CIA. Now, we've looked at who made up the CIA. Now, this was Germany was one looking for their own New World Order. A different strategy was taken on, but really the same thing by the US, and they're bringing in the Germans to help create this. Their intelligence, their CIA. Braun, the Nazi scientist that run the V1 and V2 operations, was brought in. He became one of the leaders of NASA, and he built the first successful rockets that were launched by the US military after the Kennedy administration wanted to respond to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik. There's this space war going on, and the public know little of it, and they're not, what they tell us is they're looking for life out there, but it's about domination in the skies for domination in the world. The space station, that which the Germans dreamed of in the 50s, would be a turret structure with a diameter of 76 metres, this built on the concept of a rotating, wheel-shaped station introduced in 1929 by Hermann Potnick in his book The Problem of Space Travel, The Rocket Motor. The space station would spin around on a central docking nave to produce artificial gravity and would be assembled in a 1,730 kilometre 2-hour high inclination Earth orbit, allowing observation of essentially every point on Earth on at least a daily basis. WikiLeaks gave us some idea of this competition going on. That is the US and China. There was this vacuum, and up comes China to assert itself in the battle for power in space. And so the leaked documents told us of this, and a timeline is given of that space race. But you can look that up for yourself, starting back in 1967 and going through to 2000. There would be some interesting information in there. You can see how there is a literal battle. You can see how the US shoots down certain things, and it's something that's not put out there. You wouldn't even know it's going on except for WikiLeaks having put this out. So he's a different man before and after, with information. Here we are in the first 100 minutes, but after this he's given the background of things, and he says the common person, the man in the street, the man and woman in the street, is too small-minded to look after their own affairs. You need someone greater looking after it. And so he speaks then of the New World Order. If he had spoken of this before his election, nobody would have listened to him. Unreported important information. Dumb dogs do not bark. And this is what we have. They're paid off, they're silenced, their job is kept because they don't give you the information. The information that we can trust. The only information is, well, let me put it to you straight, a Reformation Bible. That which does not change the times, prophecy times that are given, is that Bible that can be trusted. And that's what made it spread through, like wildfire through Europe. And here's this war that continues, a war on privacy. President Barack Obama's speech on NSA strategies to stop terrorist attacks on America will once again showcase his cynical skill in justifying the use of tactics created by George W. Bush while taking those anti-terror weapons away from the next president. I like how they split the picture in two, and you've got Obama and Bush there in the same person, and it's true. And so he puts it in such a way that, you know, I can be trusted with these things, but the next person won't be able, you might not be able to trust him with it, with the power that's at his fingertips, and with the surveillance. The FAA Moderation and Reform Act of 2012 calls for the full integration of civilian drones by September 2015. Additionally, the Act anticipates 30,000 drones operated by 2020, and they want to look at how they can control this, like they can control the computers, or they can look through all the information and siphon through it. So again, as they put this multi-billion industry into place, they will use it to their advantage. The unmanned aerial system industry is forecast to expand from 5.9 billion in 2012 to 11.3 billion in 2021. A 2012 UAS competition hosted by DAPRA, and they're of course part of CIA, produced more than 140 teams and 3,500 people from 153 countries. He's sitting on the other end of the pen now, said the former Obama aide. He has more information than he did then, and he trusts himself to use these powers more than he did the Bush administration. The US successfully tested the Falcon, which can hit a target anywhere in the world within 1 hour flying at 15,000 miles per hour. That's 21,000 kilometers per hour. So this is a operation or that which was started in the 60s. They would take it up with a rocket, and then it would set off on its own flying course from there, come down using a parachute to break the speed, and it's in its development, and it should be about developed by now. Militarization of space by the United States. New military space plane that is being tested now by the Pentagon. It has shown its ability to stay in orbit for a whole year at a time. Continuous surveillance, continuous operation, an unpiloted space drone essentially, and then with ground stations all over the planet that the United States has established, what they call downlink stations that communicate with US military satellites all over the planet. This whole network has been put into place to really give the US, as they say in one of their planning documents, control and domination of space. The US Air Force mysterious X-37B spaceplane is nearing a major milestone, 1 year of travel in Earth orbit, performing duties in support of long-term space objectives. The unmanned X-37B spacecraft flying a mission known as Orbital Test Vehicle 3 launched into space atop of the Atlas V rocket from Florida's Cape Canaveral Air Force Station on December 11, 2012.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We have ignition of the RS-68 engines. 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy rocket carrying the NRO L-65 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office.
The dreams of the 1950s and 60s has come to life. The German rocket scientists which were brought to America had a dream of space stations that could be used for military purposes to target places on Earth. Space vehicles that could probe or be used militarily are those things which were looked at in the 50s and 60s. Drone technology from Area 51, technology with supersonic planes that could arrive anywhere in the world within an hour. These are the dreams of the 50s and 60s which are now come to life. Imagine what now is being thought of for war purposes at this very time that will have implications for the future. The Bible talks of this power allowing fire to come down in the sight of men. In Revelation 13 it speaks of this. But also, as we remember, when the Bible speaks of a nation, it also, in the other hand, is speaking who is behind that nation, talking of Satan. In this case, Satan himself, appearing as the Christ, will cause miracles in that it will be fire will come down in the sight of men. Also, in another sense, the USA with its military might can cause fire to come down in the sight of men from space. The ballistic missile defense system. Something that they wanted the Russians to drop. The Russians in the competition had a financial collapse which was orchestrated by US and Vatican, but they would follow on in this mission to be the world dominators. However, the real winner is the Vatican, for the US, in all its spending, in all its efforts to gain control, will overreach and will face financial national ruin that is predicted.
In some ways it is more than a military superpower. It is an intelligence superpower if you look at the relative spends of the United States compared to others. Now that said, there is increasing integration occurring between states that the US does not control, for example, along the Silk Road. But I wouldn't discount the effect of the United States. There is no country that has anything like 1,400 military bases spread over 120 countries around the world. No one is anywhere near that.
Consider this declassified Air Force project, 1794. The Avro Canadian VZ9. So it was a Canadian company that developed these sources as part of the secret US military project carried out in the early years of the Cold War. We have a nightcap UFO CIA connection. Nightcap stands for these UFO societies, and President Truman persuaded a reluctant Roscoe, then the Rear Admiral, to become director of the Central Intelligence and run the Central Intelligence Group. Under the National Security Act of 1947, he was nominated and confirmed by the US Senate as DCI, now in charge of the newly established Central Intelligence Agency. So it's giving you his credentials. Roscoe was on Nightcap's board of governors from about 1957 until 1962. So he's on as the board of governors on this UFO Society group. And we have Donald Edward Kehoe. During the Second World War, he was recalled to active duty with the rank of major and served in the Pentagon. NICAP's board, headed by Colonial Joseph Byron III, forced Kehoe to retire as NICAP's chief. Byron was actually a former covert CIA agent who had served as founder and head of the CIA's Psychological Warfare Division. Well, that's interesting. The first Avro car being readied at the Avro factory, 1958. That's that picture there. The operation was scaled back. So, in reports of sightings of UFO activity, one story related to me on the Australia east-south coast, a lady's son was working on security work. 5 o'clock in the morning, one of these lands in front of him and has the lights. It's round, lights flashing, and he puts his security light on it, and it takes off. So I thought I would verify that story also, and I looked up the local paper and said there have been several UFO sightings that have been reported, and there was American activity in the area. I thought that was quite interesting. Consider also that evil angels masquerade themselves as extraterrestrial beings. Whatever is in the imagination of man, they are ready to plant and develop on these untruths. They are ready to reinforce the imaginations of men that refuse God. So we have the USA looking out into space, so we're told. I consider it's more a matter of warfare, but we're told they're looking for beings on other planets, yet they look not to the Word of God and what it has to say. The Declassified Air Force Project 1794. What interests me is anything they started in the 50s and 60s they never let go of. Do you think they would have just let go of this technology concerning UFOs? Or did they actually continue it and develop it to what we have of sightings and people saying it's people, aliens and people from other countries, and then they go as far as to say that it's UFO, it's aliens that are giving information to the US government. I think that's all a little bit far-fetched, but we can see that they had the developments here back in the 50s, and says it was scaled back. But here we have an interesting story. A lady told me about his son her son, and this was over 10 years ago, was on the south coast of Australia, on the east coast. What happened was he was on security, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and a UFO landed right in front of him. So he put the security light on, and it had the round lights and typical UFO look, and it whizzed off. And so I thought from this story I might look at the local newspapers to see if they'd seen anything, heard anything, been any reports. And they said there'd been several sightings and the US had been active in the area. That's all it had to say. So I believe they have the technology out there. Consider this declassified Air Force project, 1794, the Avro-Canadian VZ-9. So it was a Canadian company that developed these sources as part of the secret US military project carried out in the early years of the Cold War. We have a nightcap UFO CIA connection. Nightcap stands for these UFO societies, and President Truman persuaded a reluctant Roscoe, then the Rear Admiral, to become director of the Central Intelligence and run the Central Intelligence Group. Under the National Security Act of 1947, he was nominated and confirmed by the US Senate as DCI, now in charge of the newly established Central Intelligence Agency. So it's giving you his credentials. Roscoe was on Nightcap's board of governors from about 1957 until 1962. So he's on as the board of governors on this UFO society group. And we have Donald Edward Kehoe. During the Second World War, he was recalled to active duty with the rank of major and served in the Pentagon. NICAP's board, headed by Colonial Joseph Byron III, forced Kehoe to retire as NICAP's chief. Byron was actually a former covert CIA agent who had served as founder and head of the CIA's Psychological Warfare Division. Well, that's interesting. The first Avro car being readied at the Avro factory, 1958. That's that picture there. The operation was scaled back. So, in reports of sightings of UFO activity, one story related to me on the Australia east-south coast, a lady's son was working on security work. 5 o'clock in the morning, one of these lands in front of him and has the lights, it's round, lights flashing, and he puts his security light on it and it takes off. So I thought I would verify that story also, and I looked up the local paper and said there have been several UFO sightings that have been reported and there was American activity in the area. I thought that was quite interesting. Consider also that evil angels masquerade themselves as extraterrestrial beings. Whatever is in the imagination of man, they are ready to plant and develop on these untruths. They are ready to reinforce the imaginations of men that refuse God. So we have the USA looking out into space, so we're told, I consider it's more a matter of warfare, but we're told they're looking for beings on other planets, yet they look not to the Word of God and what it has to say. The deadly wound was healed and all the world wondered after the beast. And so that beast cannot get along by itself, it needs another power. It's the little horn. It has no power of its own, but by its influence in the minds of other men, and by the control of those minds to control powers to do its bidding. And so that control is back. All the world wondered after the beast. At the Centennial Conference of American Catholics held in Baltimore, November 1890. Talking of the little horn, the Bible says that it has the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. It has vision. It sees these things long term. Catholics of the United States are called to make America Catholic. The Church triumphant in America, Catholic truth will travel on the wings of American influence and with it encircle the universe. 1890. At a time when the papacy's dominance wouldn't be dreamed of. Our purpose is to make America dominantly Catholic. 1990. 1910. It seems to me that the main support of Protestantism comes from the United States and England. If we put an end to this effort in England and the United States by making these nations predominantly Catholic, we will have removed the chief obstacle to the conversion of the world to the true faith. A vigorous effort in the United States at this time will reduce the opposition to an insignificant condition. In the course of another century, notice what it says, it has great vision. The Protestant sects will be the study for historians and antiquity, along with Arianism. Arianism, they obliterated those who believed that Christ was, we'll put it their way, a created being. They obliterated all their writings and anything of them, so there can be no comparison of these groups. We're talking about Arianism from the time when the Vatican, when the papacy was first given its power, back in the times of Justinian the Emperor. His fight was against Arian kings. Sir Arthur C. Clarke, the world we live in, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The invisible is becoming real. Now I have this story of the king of Syria. And he went to attack Israel, and each time the Lord's servant, the prophet, would tell Israel, warn them, and that would avert the attack from the king of Syria. Now this happened several times. The king of Syria said, "Who has betrayed us here? Who is letting them know our information?" And they said, "It is not us, king, but it is the prophet." So they go down to the city to surround the prophet. And the prophet, in speaking to his servant, says for him to fear not, for we are more than what they are. You see, but he can't see that. And so he prays to the Lord that he might open his eyes, and there he beholds the army of heaven. Those who are on our side are more than those, and of greater strength and authority than those that are against us. So we have in this story a wonderful revelation of God's army working to protect God's people, and some would scoff and say, well, that's absolutely incredible and ridiculous. Who has seen God? How can we know He's true? Well, we're talking about some prophecies here. Perhaps that might give faith in those things. It should do. I've told you before it come to pass that you might know that I am he. These are the words of Jesus.
How invisible are we talking here? If I walked into a room with a soldier wearing one of these cloaks?
You wouldn't see him at all. He would be completely invisible to you.
This isn't make-believe. The military has seen the so-called quantum stealth technology. It works by bending the light around an object, even concealing most of a person's shadow. Imagine what that could do for a sniper hiding in a field, or the American pilots who ejected over Libya when their fighter jets crashed last year.
They could actually pull out, very similar to what they carry with a survival blanket, throw it over top of them, and unless you walked right into them, you wouldn't know that they were there.
As we've stated, those projects which started so long ago, in the 50s, in the 60s, and now they're coming to fruition. Also, we have reported that it's possible to make objects invisible. How long have they been working with this? It was reported here as given in the Philadelphia experiment that they could partially make a ship to be invisible. So we're talking back here, and I think it's testing began in 1943. So that's the Philadelphia experiment. So there was some reports of this being true, and it was dismissed, but they must have been working on this thing for a long time for it to be becoming reality and being reported at this point in time. And what does it say in the Bible concerning angels? They're beings of light, of Lucifer, a fallen angel. Beings of light in which light can move around them so they are not seen. You see, we look at things according to the world that we know it, but we should be in this modern age with electricity, magnets, making things invisible. The Bible should be becoming a reality. That which is not seen becoming real to us. Edward Hubble's arrival at Mount Wilson Observatory, California in 1919 coincided roughly with the completion of the 100-inch Hooker telescope, then the world's largest. At that time, the prevailing view of the cosmos was the universe consisted entirely of the Milky Way galaxy. His observations made in 1922 to 1923 proved conclusively that these nebulas he viewed were much too distant to be part of the Milky Way and were in fact entire galaxies outside of our own. Now people still wonder at this point if there's life on other planets and if we could possibly find one. Well, the main reason the US is acting out in space is primarily to win global control, and it's about the war effort. It's not about getting to some other place or finding life. That's a by the way and something to put our attention to take it away from the real purpose. And the real purpose, as I said, is for warfare. As a human being, you are an insignificant mote in the unimaginable vastness of the cosmos. How true is that statement? Psalms 8 verse 3 says, "When I consider thy heavens, the works of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that thou visitest him?" And of course, the Son of God becomes also the Son of Man. What privileges we're being given. So we need to stretch our mind. Space, grandeur, and Christians ask, is there life out there. They're believing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Some are Nostradamus, don't know the prophecies, asking if there's life out there. And in Job it says, when the sons of God came in to present themselves before the Lord, Satan came with them as the representative of this planet. And he presents to us lies that we love to swallow. Lies concerning what happens in this life, in death, of the future life. We need to understand the Word of God and let it expand our ideas of the reality of now, what's happening right now, the future of this world, and the possibilities into eternity and what we need to do to be part of that.